Folks, welcome inside the Parisi Palace, high above 3773's Broadway. This is the Jake Feinberg Show, comedy on Power Talk. Thank you so much for making us part of your day today, and we'll do this again. We tried last week to create a transmission with a legendary piano player, but the spirits at work wouldn't allow my recorder to process the information, so it makes more sense now that we are in the friendly confines of the Power Talk studio. Mickey in his friendly confines of his home in Melbourne, Australia. Mickey Tucker, welcome back to the Jake Feinberg Show.
Thank you so much for having me.
You know, Mick, I wanted you to talk a little bit about how much, when you were coming up, how much labels were used in music. And what I mean by that is we could walk down the street together and ask 20 different people what their concept of jazz is, and we'd get 20 different answers. And I'm sort of from that Duke Ellington school that it's all music, and I wanted to know how conscious you were of labels coming up.
Not very conscious at all of labels, but I do agree with Duke. It's all music, and there are so many facets to jazz that, I mean, you can call it anything you like, but it's all music. You got 12 notes before you start repeating yourself, and that's, you can do whatever you want to with those notes. You can establish different idioms or whatever you want to call that. I don't think that makes a hell of a lot of difference. The thing about it is how good are you at it? And
Yes.
How much do you put into it? You get out of it what you put into it. I could have gone the classical route. As a matter of fact, I earned my degree in doing classical music. But I really don't. I'm really not much one for labeling. If it's good music, it's good music. If it's not, it's not.
Yeah, no. Well,
There
can
you
you
go.
talk about? I mean, was there a defining moment when you got tired of taking cues from a conductor and realized you wanted to compose your own music? You know, I mean, we have so much. There's such a divide, Mick, between like the classical musician and then the sort of jammer or the guy who likes to play improvisationally. At least in the modern era, like younger cats, like there's a schism between those two, and a lot of it's because in the case of the classical musician, you know, they've been reared to take directives from a conductor, and they've learned to perfect the music. And when you treat it as such a precious thing, when someone wants to push you out of your comfort zone and you fall apart, you think you're a failure, when in fact it could be the best thing that ever happened to you. And I wonder if there was some point in your early career when you were like, you know, I dig good music, but I want to create my own music and not keep taking cues from a conductor.
Well, I didn't do a hell of a lot of work with conductors, so to speak.
I don't, you know, you had a classical upbringing.
But,
you know, that's all I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. I was like most people. I started off taking piano lessons when I was about 6, 7 years old, and at that time, what happened was my parents had bought a piano for my sister to take lessons, who's 2 years older than I was, but he had this record collection. He had, you know, all kinds of jazz records. And I got bitten early in the piece I got infected with the so-called jazz bug. And even though I was trained classically, jazz was what I always wanted to do. It took a hell of a lot of time to get to that because none of my teachers, none of them could play a note of jazz.
Wow.
So I had to sort of teach myself and pick other people's brains who were actually doing it to learn the idiom. And that's basically how I got into it. I just never gave up on my goal of wanting to play jazz.
Can you talk a little bit about some people that were, or a seminal person who, or you picked their brain? Because you're talking about teachers that didn't know how to play a note of jazz. I mean, when I think of jazz, I think of improvisation. I mean, it could be.
Right. Well,
yeah.
If there's no improvisation, in my opinion, if there's no improvisation, there's no jazz. If it doesn't swing, there's no jazz. Now, I know the avant-garde movement, which is another branch of the tree. Some people might dispute that, but that's the way I feel about it. I have done avant-garde, but I didn't get the satisfaction out of that from just swinging. Playing with great musicians, coming to know great musicians. I was fortunate when I was at Morehouse College. My teacher at that time, who's a great classical pianist, as a matter of fact, she has a doctorate degree in performance. She's performed with the Atlanta Symphony, and she can play all of the Chopin, Brahms, you name it. She could do it. She helped me understand the instrument itself, not jazz, but at the same time, there was a guy at Morehouse who had come back on some kind of veterans bill or something that did his tuition. He's a pianist from Detroit named Harold McKinney.
I know that cat.
I don't know if you ever heard.
Yeah, dude. That dude was legendary.
He's another one of our unsung heroes. Well, Harold McKinney was there at the same time. So while I was studying classical with Joyce, I was also picking Harold McKinney's brain with jazz. And I learned just as much from him as I did from her, but on the other side of the spectrum, so to speak.
Can you talk about something you learned from McKinney? I mean, why? First of all, why was he down in Atlanta, in the Georgia area?
Yeah, well, like I'm saying, he had there was, I don't know how it worked, but veterans, which he was, had either a reduced tuition or somehow or another, their admission was easier than just, guy coming out of high school and applying to get in. So that's how he was there. It just so happened that I was, again, in the right place at the right time. And, yeah, I learned quite a bit from McKinney. I learned, like, voicing of chords. I didn't even know what the Yardbird scale was until he taught me that. And
this is great.
He just helped me so much with the concept of jazz and how to understand it and how to go about executing it.
Mick, we have a game on this program called Name That Voice. I don't expect you to know who this is, but just pay attention to the content, and we'll come back and break it down.
I'm sorry. To me, there's no best big band drummer of all time. There is no best big band drummer. No.
Okay, so just to be clear, this is so hip because I can hear it in the music that you started to craft. And what I'm saying is, Well, that was just my voice. Basically, that was an interview. I didn't have the right part queued up, but that was. I was trying to play you a clip from an interview I did with. Did you know the drummer Joe Chambers?
Sure, I know Joe Chambers. I've worked with Joe. We did a tour together with. I can't even remember the saxophone player's name now. Oh, Steve Gross.
Oh my! Wait, you and
Grossman.
Grossman and Chambers?
Yep, and Junie Booth was playing.
My dear friend Junie Booth, my dear. So I've interviewed all these cats, and I interviewed Grossman. I think I did the only interview ever with Steve Grossman. I'll have to send you that. But Chambers was talking about. I found it revelatory because he was talking to Stanley Crouch, rest in peace, and Crouch said,
I knew Stanley.
Sure, he said the real free jazz. Now this is just Stanley talking, but he said the real free jazz was the kind of music that Bobby Hutcherson and Joe Henderson and Andrew Hill were making on Blue Note in the mid '60s, and it had tradition, it swung. They could play changes, and then there was also some new vocabulary in there. He goes, and my generation and younger, I'm talking about me now, it's kind of in vogue to consider guys like Albert Eiler and Archie Shepp pioneers of the free jazz movement. But and if I had the quote queued up, and unfortunately I don't, Chambers basically said when he was down, they'd be playing down the street and playing altissimo and squeaking and squawking, and they couldn't hold a gig at Radio City. They couldn't back up a singer. And it was really revelatory. Like you talked about, the avant-garde, it was another branch of the tree. But did you feel like your heart, regardless of whether it didn't swing hard enough for you, did you feel compelled to go in that direction of avant-garde music? And also, how did you view those guys that were coming? Like, I consider guys like Junie Booth and Joe Chambers, they could play free music, but they had all the tradition and the rudiments, and they could back up a singer, and they could keep a gig, and yet there was this whole other free movement that, in retrospect, the cats, Joe Chambers included, didn't really respect those guys. They didn't really think that they were playing the real shit. And I just wanted you to talk about where you came down on the whole thing.
Oh, jeez. That's hard to say. You mentioned another name, Archie Shepp. I've toured and recorded with Archie, too.
Don't get me wrong. This is not it was just fascinating to me that guys like Chambers, and you were in the same scene, but those guys really didn't look very. I mean, he said Shepp got better, and he became he got better at playing and becoming a more complete musician over time. But for the most part, they were squeaking and squawking. To me, it was revelatory for somebody who wasn't around at that time.
Yeah, well, for some people that can be hard to listen to. It's because a lot of it is discordant. Changes, forget about that, man. I'll tell you, I do believe that the avant-garde movement, if you want to call it that, was an attempt to get away from having the stand set for you that how many of Harold Arlen or Richard Rodgers' tunes do you know?
Dig.
And I think the avant-garde movement was to sort of get away from that, to not have that be the measuring stick for your musicianship. And they took it as far away from being locked into following chord changes and this and that to just it's as different from that as you could possibly get. Now, it's a funny thing. I told you I toured Japan with Archie Shepp, And it wasn't until about the third or fourth concert that Archie Shepp sounded like people were used to hearing Archie Shepp sound. He was playing in.
Wow. He was playing so in.
It wasn't until about the fourth concert that he stepped out and into the avant-garde thing. And of course, he was the band leader, so we all went with him. But yeah, I've got a recording here. I played for some musicians who I'll play. I forget this standard. If You Could See Me Now, I believe it was a tune, and I'll play that for musicians that I know just to trick them, and I'll ask them, who is this? And most of them guess is Ben Webster. That's how in he was playing.
Oh my! Wait, what? Do you have any idea what year this was? In the 90s? When was this? No,
this was early 80s.
He was playing in, dude. That's unreal, man.
Yeah, so I'm not so sure that Shep didn't know all of this before he became known as an avant-garde musician, but he certainly does know it.
I just want you to go a little bit deeper on that.
Yeah,
but this is important. Like, so what did it mean? Because, I mean, Miles, Plug Nickel sessions, they were playing those Richard Rodgers songbook and, Rodgers and Hammerstein, and they'd slow the tempos down, or they'd leave the head of the tune. I'm just curious about, like, that. At that time, Eiler and Shep and all those cats, you're saying they were pushing against this idea that in order to be considered a credible musician in jazz, you had to know all the standards. Am I hearing that correctly?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
That was sort of that was the slide rule. Or, how many standard tunes do you know?
Right.
Well, guys got tired of that, man. Why should that be the standard? Why can't we play something else? And actually, I think it's a good thing. It's not to everybody's taste, and even though I have done it myself, it's not my favorite way of playing. I'd rather, as long as it swings and there's improvisation to it, that's what I prefer to do. Now, I've played this crazy music, if you want to call it that, where it doesn't matter what notes you play, what tempo you play, what chord changes or no chord changes. I've done that, but that's not what I really feel in myself. I'm more at home swinging.
Well, I mean, we all want to swing like Mickey Tucker. I mean, isn't it interesting that Shep? It's interesting that Shep wouldn't just say, "Oh yeah," like he'd blow it. Like at that time, he would just to let people know he'd play a standard, and then maybe he just totally disguised that because he probably knew that stuff at that time.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying.
Exactly. I'm just surprised he didn't.
My suspicion is, yes, he did know that stuff at that time. But back to my original statement, I think the avant-garde movement was a way to sort of step away from that, is to not accept that as being a judge of how good a musician you were, is that you had to play standards all the time. And I think that's a valid movement. Whether you like it or not, that's a different story.
Talking to Mickey Tucker here on the Jake Feinberg Show. Did you wind up at W. Eugene Smith's loft?
I don't remember that.
I'm just trying to, because there were these
I don't
places in Midtown. Steve Swallow, I'm just going to read you this. He said, in the early 60s, W. Eugene Smith's loft was a focal point for jazz sessions. This was a building where Hall Overton, the composer, had a floor and rehearsals for the Thelonious Monk Town Hall Band. There were sessions going on all day and all night in Loft and several others that were up and down 6th Avenue. Ronnie Freed, the drummer, was a denizen at one time. I played with Sonny Clark on several occasions. At 7 o'clock in the morning, the trucks would arrive from the countryside and dump off tons and tons of fresh flowers. This wonderful scent would rise up to the lofts. We'd be at that point just finishing up the night. Life began around 5 o'clock when that part of Manhattan would fall silent, when the businesses who were there would close up and the people would go home. All of a sudden, another New York would rise up. Can you talk about that New York for Mickey Tucker? And I'm not,
No. Actually, no, I can't, because I didn't. That was about close to 10 years before I went to New York.
Well, then, okay, so explain to...
I didn't go to New York until the late 60s.
So that was early. Can you talk about...
That was before I ever went on... That was before I was even on the scene.
Well, you were cooking the groove where? Down in... Well, I mean, you were not in New York at that point, but can you talk about the experiment, like after your gigs in New York, like was there a venerable loft scene? I remember George Braith, I'm not sure if you ever played with him, but he talked about...
No.
He talked about going to these jam sessions with Clifford Jarvis, in the Train. Again, this is a little bit earlier, but was there a loft scene or some kind of experimental music scene where after you sang for your supper, you would go and play with the other cats?
Yeah, Jolie Wilson, the singer, had a loft.
Jolie Wilson, dude, that I've heard a couple of tracks. That dude was a badass, dude.
Yeah, tell me about it. I did. Just Jolie and myself did 3 tours under the auspices of State Department.
No.
Just Jolie and myself.
Just a duo.
Yeah.
Just a duo.
Yeah,
wow.
Yep. He sang and I played the piano, and we got some damn good reports from everywhere we went, and we went to we went to Beirut, we went to Singapore, Kuala Lumpur, a bunch of places, man. But but Joe he did have a loft.
And so, what was the vibe? Like, can you talk about like
the way he did?
Yeah.
And it was sort of like you described the other.
Yeah, Eugene Smith's. Yeah.
Yeah, guys would go there after they finished their gigs. They'd go and hang out at Jolie Wilson's loft, and if they felt like playing, they'd play, have a ball, just relax. They'd already done the gig,
right?
So
they already had money in their pocket, hopefully. Yeah, no, I mean, was like Stafford James up there? I remember this record with Stafford James with Jolie Wilson. I mean, Jolie was like a blues singer.
Well, not in my opinion. I mean, he could sing the blues.
Yeah, no, that's what I'm saying. I'm not saying he couldn't do other things. But I mean, you would say that relationship started at that loft, or did you meet him before that?
No, actually, it's hard to remember when I met anybody, but I do believe that I met Jolie at his loft. I think the first time I ever met him was at his loft.
Wow.
It was called, I remember the name of it now. It was called the Ladies' Fort.
The Ladies' Fort. Where was it located in Manhattan?
Jeez, I can't. My memory is
Sorry, I mean,
shot.
even just you don't have to get the exact
I
address.
do believe it. I believe it was around 13th Street. I'm not sure, man. I have to research that. I'm not good at remembering.
No, Mick, you're doing.
that.
Mick, listen, I got another name that voice for you. Just again, don't worry about this. Is queued up right, so take a listen to this, and we'll come back and break it down.
Okay,
Spiritual thing is basically when you're playing, and it's just not bebop. This is other music too, but bebop is in jazz is probably. That's the high end of what we do as jazz musicians. But just the spirituality comes from it's like something. Now this may sound abstract, but it's something that Wayne Shorter said to me one time. He said that the only way you can really, really, really play is that you have to go to the store and buy some milk for your grandmother. You know, when he said that to me and the drummer Omar Hakim. Now he had a few drinks, a 3-year-old drink.
Right.
I said, "Wow!" But a couple days later, it hit me. You know, because it's like to come if you have one of those kind of families. You go to see your grandmother. She says, "Go to the store and get me some milk," and you go there. There's a love. There's a love for something other than just what you're looking at. It's like your own personal love, which could come from God, which could come from the force of life. It could be whatever it is that you think makes you tick. That if you tap into that, whatever that is, it's not a material. It's not the instrument. It's not the notes. It's the life force. And that is very, when you operate on that band, that's or on that frequency in life, that is very spiritual.
Mickey Tucker, I've done 2,000 interviews over the last 11 years. That was my first with the bass player Stanley Clark, and I wanted you to talk about this concept when you reach a place collectively as a unit where you have innate trust in the people. There's telepathy going on, and then the conversation gets to a point where it's beyond any kind of appreciation or affection or codependency, and it gets to the point where you're all going to the store to get your grandma some milk. To me, that's a level of devotion beyond just anything on this planet, and I kind of wanted to know when you tapped into that particular life force and the people that you fell in with like that.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head when you said it's a life force. I don't think, well, first of all, I think it's impossible to really describe music with words.
Yes.
But it's a feeling that I don't know if anybody can definitively say where it comes from, because I don't think we know. It doesn't come from this planet, that's for sure. It comes from somewhere outside of this existence. If you're a musician and you're lucky enough, you're fortunate to be in it. And like I said, when I learned how to turn on the record player and play these jazz records that my pops had when my sister was taking piano lessons. And I couldn't wait for her to leave that piano so I could go to it and try to make some of those sounds that I was hearing on those records. Wow. So I was bitten. I was infected at a very early age with so-called jazz.
Well, I mean, like the idea that, like, could you talk about a particular band or a group where you guys, it got to a point when you were operating on a frequency that, yeah, you can't explain it in words, but you were beginning to read each other's minds, or someone would make a left turn and like a flock of geese or something, everyone would go in that direction. I mean, what was that?
Yeah, I've worked with a few bands where it happens. And it's a weird thing, Jake. New York is full of thousands of good musicians, but you can get a bandstand full of all good musicians, and it doesn't gel.
Mm-hmm.
On the other hand, you can get a bandstand full of good musicians, and it does. And things just, but what you're talking about, and this comes to you feed off of each other. I think Bill Hardman and Junior Cook had a quintet.
Oh my! Are you kidding me, dude? That is filthy, dude.
No. Yeah, we worked a lot together.
Talk about that. Talk about that band. I mean, so please break it down.
Oh, nothing to break it. We're talking about hardcore bebop.
Wow. I mean, that's like, dude, Freddie Hubbard was probably in the audience for that stuff, dude. I mean, it's unreal, man.
Oh yeah. And sometimes, you get that combination that just gels. Another guy that we really locked up together with, and this is kind of strange because they're both chordal instruments, was Ted Dunbar, guitarist.
Oh, dude, the numerologist, the genius, a pharmacist, dude. Dude, Bernard Purdy loves Ted. Ted Dunbar was the baddest cat. Dude, you know what he used to say? Church is on the bandstand. Love him, dude.
Yeah, well, that's true, man. That's true. It's very spiritual up there.
Jesus, man. So, I mean, what are the antecedents? Yeah.
In addition to which, Ted Dunbar kept his pharmacy license current in 3 states.
Dude, the man was an total freaking avatar, and he was ridiculous guitar player.
Oh, tell me about it, man. Tell me about it.
So, what were you when you? Wait, say it again. What album were you on?
One of my favorite albums is with Ted Dunbar. It's his album. So it was a quartet album called "Gentle Time Alone." It's on Steeplechase record.
Sure. Are you in the rhythm section on that?
Yeah.
Oh my God, that is so beautiful. So I want to break this down because just for the audience, I tripped out the other day. I found this insane keyboard album with Roland Hanna and Mickey with Richard Davis and Eddie Gladden, and it's just like ridiculous. Then I come to find out that Roland Hanna basically had to fill in for John Hicks. But
right.
Can you talk about when you first got to Manhattan? I mean, you're talking very modestly about Junior Cook and freaking all these heavyweight Ted Dunbar. How did do you remember like at a certain point you had to sit in, you had to go somewhere and or were you already? I'm trying to remember if the idea with the engagement with Blakey at Baker's Keyboard was before or after you moved to New York, or was there like a place that you went to sit and where you met some of these cats and began to develop because ultimately it comes down to love. I mean, it's like, do you get off on these guys personally, and then you get up on the bandstand and you start to, have a conversation. But was there a place? Go ahead.
I think it's more word of mouth. It gets around. People will hear you play, and if they like the way you play, they'll pass that along to somebody else who may be looking for a pianist. And I think it's more that way. Musicians telling other musicians about you. My very first professional gig was with a singer named Demeter Joe.
Right.
I don't know if you ever heard of heard of her or not.
I see her records a lot. I've never been tempted exactly to throw them on, but I know you road dogged with her for a while.
Yeah, yes, I did, man. It's a great voice. Unfortunately, Demeter's management was not really up to scratch because she should have been a lot bigger than what she was. I mean, for people knowing who she was, because she had a voice that's second to none. And I'm talking about in that category with Sarah Vaughan and Ella Fitzgerald and stuff.
Wow.
She was that kind of singer.
Wow.
That was my very first professional gig after I got to New York. And do you know, to this very day, Jake, I don't know. I never asked Demeter. I don't know how in the hell she ever got my name or knew who I was.
I just love that you never would even ask her that. I just love that you don't even know. It's just such a mystery.
But somebody would have had to tell her about me, or she wouldn't have known.
Right.
That's what I'm saying.
The word of mouth, of course.
Word of mouth.
Well, and that was Bill Hardman. Bill Hardman was the one. So wait, Bill Hardman, you had been playing with Junior Cook and Bill Hardman, and that's when Hardman was like, told Blakey, get this cat in your band. Is that right?
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the question.
Well, didn't Bill Hardman hipped Blakey to you, right? Isn't that right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So had you been playing? Had you already been playing with Hardman and Junior Cook before you joined Blakey, or before you got with Blakey?
No, that was after I was with the Messengers.
So
because,
Hardman, when did you first
that
meet? How did you meet Hardman originally? How did he get hip to you?
He was doing a gig in Newark. A guy named Joe Thompson had a band. I'm trying to think. It wasn't the Key Club. The Cadillac Club. It was called.
That was right near. It's so cool. Go ahead.
Yeah, and Bill Hardman was in that band, and so was I, and that's where I first met Bill Hardman.
Wow.
So that was before. That was before I joined the Messengers.
And you were
quite a bit before, actually.
Yeah, no, just tell me the story again, because it got lost with the spirits. Tell the audience about that iconic night at Baker's when you got the call to join the Messengers.
Oh, well, I got this call. The pianist who was with the band was somebody that Art wasn't happy with, and Bill called me and said, "Listen, man, you need a piano player. See, Art's not happy with. I won't call any names, but anyway, he sent me a plane ticket, and I went to Detroit." And that's where I joined the band. I had not rehearsed with them. I didn't know anything they played. They were mostly playing Walter Davis Jr.'s music.
Oh my God! Geez.
And Benny Golson.
Yeah.
And Benny Golson's music. Some of Benny's tunes. Well, everybody knows some of Benny's.
Killer Joe, those kinds of things. Yeah.
Yeah, all that stuff. But we didn't play Killer Joe with the Messengers. We played stuff like Along Came Betty, Blues March, and stuff like that.
Totally.
But most of it was Walter Davis's music, and I didn't know any of that stuff. And I walked up on the bandstand. Fortunately, they had some cheat sheets for me with with the changes to the tunes and the titles of the tunes, and I jumped into very cold water.
No, deep water. Deep water. Deep.
but you're cold and deep.
Cold and deep
Yeah, but,
for Mickey. Dude, but I mean, once you got the blood circulating, you were swimming, man.
Well, I like me. So I stayed with the band until I left it, which was in the middle of a tour in Japan with the Messengers. Art didn't fire me. I left the band because we had some discrepancies about money, which is a sore spot with me.
Well, I mean, everyone has to, nobody wants to be a starving genius. You have to stand up for yourself. I mean, when you look back at, like, some of these amazing
Well, I didn't have a choice.
Well,
Pardon?
yeah, no, I mean, you had to stand. You had to stand for your principles, right? I mean, the money wasn't there, or Art was using the money for other things.
Well, I don't know. I don't know what he was using the money, but the agreement that I had with him about being paid was not living up to what it was supposed to be, and I either had to get out of there and go back home, or I wasn't going to have an apartment to go back home to. So
Wow.
I had to leave.
Wow. So it was fair to say that, I mean, you'd go weeks at a time without getting any money?
No, not that. It wasn't that bad. It was just that it wasn't always there when it was supposed to be.
I dig. No, that uncertainty is yeah. That's not going to work, you know.
I'm not going to speculate as to what happened with the money or how. I don't know how Art was being paid. I don't know any of that. All I know is the agreement that I had with him.
Totally. Well, I mean, you know, these
and
that yeah. Well, I mean, that's the. You know, Mickey, I know you're. You know, I mean, you're still incredibly cogent. Your brain is still on fire. I know you're going through a lot of therapies these days, but can you just talk about the? I mean, I have stories from people that. You know, they were this one drummer was playing Pookie's Pub, and it was Coltrane's quartet. Train had passed away, so it was Elvin, McCoy. I don't know who else was in the band, but they were burning it up. And this guy, Denny Sywell, great drummer for Paul McCartney down the road, and Wings, he asked Elvin during the intermission, could he get in and sit in with the band? And after the first tune in the second set, Elvin gave him the sticks and said, you know, you're up. And so he was he played, and afterwards they were outside, you know, doing whatever. And you know, Elvin's like, man, you could play your ass off, man. You're amazing, dude. And all of a sudden there's this kind of hulking person coming down the street, and you know, sort of stumbling, but you know, kind of looking a little bit, I don't want to say homeless, but yeah, maybe just really not in great shape. And Elvin seemed completely unconcerned. Denny was like, who is this cat? And the dude came right up to them and gave Elvin a big hug, and it was Art Blakey. And he was totally down on his luck. I mean, he was like hurting, and he was on junk. And you know, and I'm not singling out Art. I'm just saying, can you just talk about how you avoided the pitfalls of that lifestyle? Because, I mean, clearly you had to put a line in the sand and say, this isn't working for me as it related to being. I'm just saying, like, all those guys, yeah, they're all heroes now, and they're all folkloric, and yet they were all, like most people, very imperfect and very fallible. And I just wanted you to talk about how you avoided those pitfalls.
We all are. I'm not so sure it was about me avoiding it. Well, I guess I did, but
Well, you're still here to talk about it, I'll tell you that much, yeah.
I became aware early on because I saw so much of that going on around me that was a trap that I knew I did not want to fall into. I didn't want to, I felt I had too much at stake to go to a gig drunk or so high on smack I couldn't sit there. So that's what pulled my coat. That's, if you can say, I avoided it. I just tried to stay away from that as much as possible. I had a reputation for always being on time, always being sober on the gig.
Well, that's important.
And
yeah.
that's about as simple as I can put it. But hang on now.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of cats that would not apply to. And I didn't want to be one of those guys.
It's so interesting. I wonder if do you feel like, in some ways, was it part of, quote unquote, not you didn't buy into it, and you had, part of you being somebody who was a reliable accompanist was that you were on time, you were sober during the gigs, you were sober, you played your ass off, and you could do anything musically. But do you feel like some of the hard drugs became sort of part of, quote unquote, the jazz life, that you sort of had to, for so long it was, Bird was like, everyone's like, oh, well, I got to be like Bird, man. And they thought because he was on junk that they'd sound like him.
Yeah, that would help them play better.
Right.
Yeah.
That would, and then, you talk to enough cats in the this is before you got to New York, but you talk to guys in the 50s that play bebop. In some cases, if you weren't on junk, then you were not in the club. You weren't trusted. And it was sort of this.
Yeah, well.
I'm just wondering, where did that, not where did you come down on that, but do you feel like part of that was like this, just part of this jazz life in some ways? All the cats were, a lot of cats were really.
Yeah, so like I'm saying, I saw so much of that going on around me that I consciously wanted to avoid that. And I did. About me always playing my ass off, that's not so either, because I had some bad nights just like anybody else.
Well, you were hitting clams. Yeah, everybody has bad nights. Come on,
But I'll tell you this, to be honest, I always tried to give my best. I always tried to contribute to the sound of whatever band it was I was playing with. I don't know. I've been very lucky, Jake. It seems that I was sort of like always in the right place at the right time.
Branch Rickey would say, luck is the residue of design. So I think that being lucky, right place, right time, you set yourself up for that through your own hard work.
Yeah.
But Mick, before I let you go, I just, it's so crazy. Literally, last week, Mickey and I cooked for about an hour, and then I couldn't get the file to correlate over on my computer. And the next day, I go into this just distribution center that I work at. That takes in, it's a depository for all types of media, books, and records. And this guy comes in and just drops off a box of and I'm not kidding, this was the day after I spoke to you, Mickey. And this guy drops off a box of records, and it's like you know, there's some like Joan Baez records in there and folk records, and then in the middle of this very pedestrian, I mean, it was cool. It was like maybe 30 records. Montreux, Detroit. So it was like a Detroit jazz festival based on the Montreux Jazz Festival. And it was sponsored by a beer company. And Harold, the two of the featured bands were Roy Brooks's band and Harold McKinney's band. And it was because we talked about Roy in our first discussion, and you know, this is like '82, and it was the Artistic Truth or whatever that band was. I just wanted you to talk about.
Yeah, that was the name of it.
Right, and
the Artistic Truth. Yeah.
Can you just talk about the kind of drummer he was? I feel like guys like Freddie Waits and guys like, you know, Roy Brooks. You know, they were. Again, they had their own, well, Roy especially, he fought his own demons, but can you just talk about like how you would, you know, develop simpatico with a guy like Roy? He was not a traditional bebop drummer, in my mind.
He was not a traditional person. I love
That's why I love the guy. Dude, I couldn't, I'm like Mickey, I'm saying, when I found this record, I was like, dude, the spirits are at work, because we were singing his praises the day before. I was asking you about, did he play the saw on any of these gigs? And there it is. There's the record. It's unbelievable.
Do you have the record? I did one with him.
No, the one that you did, live at Town Hall. No, I've never found, and that record's worth a couple $100. It's a very expensive record.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. No, that I've never heard that one, dude. I need to hear Mickey Tucker.
You haven't?
No.
Oh well, I'll have to get my wife on the case and see if,
dude. I mean,
can,
I love it, dude. Now, you know, maybe just talk to younger cats as a humble accompanist. How do you sync up? How do you sync up with a drummer? How have you learned to do that, especially somebody who's so outside the box?
Oh, jeez. Now that's one of the most difficult questions I have ever had anybody ask.
So you're saying words are, you can't do it with words. You can't really articulate. I'm just saying, like, some of these guys were so angular and breathing through tubes, and I mean, they were doing so much crazy stuff that could, you know, there's no right way to play. I mean, the piano's a percussive instrument, but there's really no right way to keep time on the kit, even though some people will say you have to follow certain methodologies. And, you know, your generation, because you came up with the academy people weren't coming out of the academy, and I mean, the academy was the bandstand. Yeah, the academy was the bandstand.
No academy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, good. It's funny you should say that, man. Two things on drummers and time. Like, one of the greatest compliments I've ever gotten from a well-known, a great musician was from Art Blakey, and who said to me one time, he said, "Mickey, you have a perfect sense of timing." Now, for a drummer like Art Blakey to tell you something like that,
that is ridiculous. That is sick.
That is a hell of an ego booster. Now, back to Roy Brooks and the Artistic Truth. We did gigs. We even did one that it wasn't at Baker's Keyboard Lounge, but it was in Detroit, and some other gigs. But the main set of gigs that I did with Brooks was he had gotten a grant to do concerts at the New York state prisons, and we did Greenhaven, we did Sing Sing, we did Queen's House of Detention, we did
Lewisburg,
all of the prisons in New York. In New York.
You went upstate. You go up. Did you go up to Utica and upstate too?
Yep. Oh yeah.
Yeah, because you know who did the. It's so interesting because you know who did that on the Latin salsa side was Eddie Palmieri, which is so cool. I mean, I love.
Oh yeah. No. Yeah. Well, I didn't know that.
Yeah. When I interviewed Eddie, he went to Sing Sing and all the same places. I think that's just so hip and so human to send out the most human musicians to go play for people that are not in great conditions.
Locked up.
Yeah.
That's weird. I didn't know that. I have a friend who worked a lot with Eddie Palmieri's band. His name is Mario Rivera.
Oh, sure.
Plays baritone saxophone in the band. But anyway, yeah, I didn't know that about Eddie Palmieri. Yeah, he's another one of my favorites.
Oh, he's great. I mean, when Blakey said that to you, it just meant, in my mind, it did. I mean, you have great time, but it also meant that you were able to serve the song and play what was needed at exactly the right time, putting your own accent on it, right?
Yeah, and the only suggestion he ever made to me in terms of the music was because when I comp heavy. I try to feed whatever the soloist is doing. You want it's like you're laying down a carpet for them.
Oh, I dig.
You're supporting them. I've forgotten the point that I started making.
Keeping time. Keeping solid time.
Oh yeah. He does.
He gave you the only piece of advice. Yeah.
Musically was that on the first chorus of anybody's solo, he told me to stroll. Don't play anything on their first chorus or maybe their first two choruses and stuff, because when I came into comp, that would add like a whole nother flavor to the band. Now, I was talking to Benny Green, who told me that when he was with the Messengers, I never told him to stroll. I'm saying, this is strange. That was the only thing he ever told me about playing the music was just stroll on the first chorus. And I did that, and you know what? It worked like magic. I said, I never thought about that. I would just, play the head of the tune, and then guys start playing solos, and you comp for them. It never occurred to me to not come in on their first chorus.
Just
and it
stroll.
Worked like magic.
Wow, that dude.
Stroll.
Oh my God, dude, that.
Yeah.
Hey Mick, we just cooked for an hour, man, and this one's in the books, baby. So let's get this one out, let it breathe, and maybe we can do set 2 down the road in the near future, man. I love hanging with you, man.
Hey, my pleasure, man. It's good to talk to you, Jake, and thanks so much for calling.
Yo, man. Listen, I'm going to get this up on Facebook tonight. You'll have a copy of your own to be able to listen to. But yeah, man. Really hoping that all the therapies go well and get you back to tickling the ivories, before too long.
Well, thanks for that. No, but I'm not gonna ever get back to that again, man. I don't even want to go into. No,
it's fine. You know what? I almost feel like
problems.
You kind of.
I can't even span an octave in my left hand right now, Jake. That's how bad it is. But I just wanted to throw one out to you. I don't know if you've heard it or not, but my favorite album of mine.
Yes.
Is an album called Hang In There. I'll tell you who's on it. Trumpet player is a guy that I didn't know, who Ted Dunbar turned me on to, who was the only white guy in the band. Greg Gisbert, Javon Jackson, Donald Harrison, Marvin Smitty Smith, Ray Drummond, and myself. And with the exception of one tune that was written by a student of mine, they're all original compositions. That's my favorite of my recordings.
1992 on Steeplechase.
Yeah. Oh, you know it.
Well, I'm looking it up right here. This is a ridiculous. I got to find this album. Go ahead. What were you saying about Brooks?
Saying about who?
You were going to mention something about the album with Brooks, or maybe I heard wrong. I'm not sure.
No, I wasn't. I can't even. I don't remember.
Why is it your favorite album?
Oh, because of the playing on it, man. And it wasn't until later on I discovered that I had a knack for composition. And I started writing music. Art Blakey was the one who told me, he said, you want to write music? Get some manuscript and write music. and I got into it, and I said, I do have a gift for this. I'm gonna stick with this. And turned out pretty well. I've done some compositions that are not even jazz, that are non-improvisational, that one would, for want of a better description, describe them as classical pieces. There is one that out at Indiana University, there's an organization called Archives of African American Music and Culture, and they are trying to help me get a piece performed that I got a grant from the National Endowment back in the 70s for saxophone quartet and orchestra. This is full symphonic orchestration. Something I'm still hoping that I might get a chance to hear before I pass, before I leave this earth. And so, that was a late discovery that I could compose.
Well, I mean,
don't mind it.
George Butler. I mean, that album is from '73 with Roland Hanna, and you're on fire at composing on that album. So, I mean, I'm glad.
Well, thanks for that, man.
Hey, man, listen, I'm glad you brought up that piece, that symphonic piece. I hope that gets on the bandstand. I'm going to do my best to promote that.
Well, if it does, I'll let you know.
Let's stay in touch, Mick, and much love to you, man. Thank you for be safe and be cool, man, and we'll talk soon.
All right, Jake. Thank you. Look after yourself.
Cheers, brother.
All right, bye now.
Peace. Bye. Great to hang with Mickey Tucker. We finally got it in the books. That's it for the Jake Feinberg Show. We'll see you later.